Hello and welcome to Different Perspectives. I'm Paul Indiho in Washington. This week, Angola celebrates her 50 years of independence, a milestone that stirs both pride and reflection. Since breaking free from nearly 5 centuries of Portuguese colonial rule in 1975, Angola has made significant progress. Yet, behind the modern skyline of Luanda and its oil wealth, millions still live in poverty, struggling with unemployment and limited access to education and healthcare. The big question remains, what does independence mean when freedom hasn't fully translated into opportunity? Joining me to unpack Angola's past and present and future is Rafael Marques, a veteran Angolan journalist, a political activist, and the executive director of Uforo Good Governance Center. Rafael has been working closely with the private sector to build the much-needed schools across Angola, a crucial step towards giving young people the tools to shape their country's future for the next 50 years. Hello, Rafael. Welcome back to Different Perspectives.
Hello, Paul. Good afternoon. And it's good to be back and to discuss the celebrations of 50 years of independence of Angola.
Let's get right into it. 50 years is a long time. I'm not yet even 50, but looking at what has happened in Angola over the last 50 years, it's remarkable. Maybe since you are on the ground, Luke, bring us up to speed. What does 50 years of independence mean for Angola, especially in today's world, looking at it from today's perspective?
Let me just give you a very brief example of what does it really mean. Yesterday, I published an article showcasing how the Angolan state pays roughly $1,300 a month to the General Chief of Staff of the Angolan Armed Forces. And the very same Angolan state pays $8,000 a month to a Portuguese gardener that tenders the grass at a state-owned cement company here. That's basically what we have achieved after so much fighting, is that nowadays the head of the military, which represents a tradition that goes back to the fight against slavery, against colonialism, the 27 years civil war, is treated by the Angolan state as a lesser person than a Portuguese gardener. And to give you another example, the guest of honor sitting next to the president during the celebrations was the Portuguese president. What independence do we really have? Are we really a sovereign state? And I will say no. We're not, because a great number of Angolan members of parliament and members of the government at the top levels, they all have dual citizenship, Portuguese and Angolan. So is this country really dividing the benefits of its wealth among its Angolan citizens? No. That's not the reality. And you've put it very well. We have a beautiful Luanda skyline overlooking the bay. But apart from that, when you unpick, you see a country that has not made progress in terms of human development, in terms of caring for the basic needs of the people. And another prime example, the president in his speech bragged about how Angola made such a huge effort to liberate South Africa. Today, the former soldiers who did the brunt of the fighting, you go now to the garrisons for nearly 2, 3 years, they have not received new boots. And this is one of the largest oil producing countries, the second largest in Africa and one of the largest in the world, and is not able to provide boots for its troops, uniforms for its troops. I made a study, a very simple study. How many military garrisons has the government built or the military built since independence in 50 years? A handful of them, some
Uh,
not even finished. In 50 years of independence, and yet we have generals who have become billionaires. We have government officials who have become billionaires. We have nowadays a great deal of the Angolan elite, the families of the ministers, many of them live now in Portugal, the wives and the children. So they just come to Angola or have their spouses here in government to loot and send to Portugal. Is that independence? No, it is not.
interesting
We're independent.
Interesting perspective there. I could not agree more. When I read about Angola, it saddens me to hear what you're talking about. This is a country endowed with natural resources. This is a country, if those resources were used properly, that could have maybe a GDP of $5,000. You are a very small country, but very wealthy in terms of mineral resources. So for you to say that nothing translates into tangible things for an ordinary person is quite a remarkable statement from your end. So when you say 50 years, really, so if I hear you correctly, you seem to suggest that in 50 years, Angola has not made much progress.
Let me tell you, Paul, it depends on the perspective when we talk about progress. Progress about what? Let me give you a simple example. Today, we don't have a functional public transport system in the capital. Forget about the rest of the country. And when we're talking about Angola, we tend to focus on the capital, where now a third of the population live. We don't have a public system of transportation to ensure the mobility of the people from to work. You see. Now, when you look at the children, the education system, and I've been very much involved in the education system, you have individuals reaching university, finishing low degrees without being able to write a simple page without giving too many errors. What kind of education system is that? You know, we are training individuals, and the president, again, in his speech, said that we now have 106 universities in the country. If you put all these universities together and ask how many academic papers these universities have produced last year, I doubt you will find 10 academic papers or 5 that are worth mentioning. So what we're basically doing is creating an illusion, by springing up, just letting universities flourish everywhere when we don't have a primary education system that can feed all the way up to the university level. We have over 3 million children out of the school system. We're a population of over 35 million people, 35 million people. The majority of the Angolan population is below 18. If you start making the calculations, you will see there are more than a third of the Angolan children are not in school at that age. So is that really saying, okay, the country is moving forward because we have more people now at university level or enrolled in primary education? We cannot compare with the 6, 7 million people we were at the turn of independence. We cannot do that, you know. Now, if you look at progress, and let's just count from the time we achieved full peace in 2002, when the then rebel leader, John Savimbi, got killed. Over 20 years have passed. And what is the situation? We have children eating, entire families scavenging garbage containers for food. We don't have in the country public policies on agriculture, public policies on education, public policies on health. The president has built some state-of-the-art hospitals, beautiful ones, as Trump would say, big and beautiful. Now, have we trained the doctors for those hospitals? No. Are those hospitals able to get enough funding for their maintenance? No. So what happens then is that building certain type of infrastructures has become a way of money laundering and of looting in this country, because every year the president adjudicates billions of dollars in contracts without public tender, because he has that prerogative, to his friends, to companies of his interest, so that some contracts worth $2, $3 billion, $5 billion, $1 billion, that money goes, and we are not able to have even to say that the schools that are built, the hospitals that are built, they will be maintained, because there is no budget then to maintain such infrastructures.
But Mark,
2 weeks ago,
let me do a quick follow-up on what you just said. At least you acknowledge that the government has, in a way, done some good work when it comes to hospitals. There are some roads that have been constructed on behalf of the government. There are other things, good things that the government has done. Yes, it might not translate into tangible things for ordinary people, but at least you acknowledge that the government has done some things on the ground.
Paul, let me give you an example. Many years back, I drove an editor from the Wall Street Journal to the eastern part of the country. And I was criticizing the way the Chinese were building the roads and the construction the Chinese were doing. And before we reached destination, not even halfway through, he said, Rafael, not even New York, we have such fine roads as you have here built by the Chinese. So stop criticizing your government because they're doing something good. I said, people call these roads, like we have a term, sort of makeshift roads, because one day they can be beautiful. Once the rain falls, the road disappears. The tar disappears. And I said, okay, since you have that idea, good. And as we drove past the province of Malange, we saw a beautiful school built by the Chinese. And we saw the roof of that school flying. And it wasn't a big wind, just some wind. And the roof flew
What a coincidence.
right before our eyes. So on our return, the same road we passed already had potholes. And he said, now I understand what you're saying. I can show you roads, and I've done also work on the roads where the government has
But
already spent.
one could argue that that's nature. Even here in the most advanced country, we struggle with high winds. We struggle with floods. I'm sure you watch on the news all the time. Whenever there is like a hurricane, people lose their homes. The roads are washed away. So
Excellent, Paul. We don't have hurricanes in Angola. We don't have strong winds. We don't have floods as such. What we have is lack of basic sanitation, which sometimes causes the flooding of some areas because of lack of sanitation, drainage of waters. We don't have such harsh climate conditions in Angola. We're very blessed with that. It's just shoddy construction, that takes billions
fair
of
enough.
ways. So that's what I want to say. And again, if you build a hospital that costs $200-300 million, and the turnout of patients in that hospital is of 10, 15 a day, because the hospital does not have medicine, doesn't have proper staff to maintain such equipments. Will you say that health has improved because you have showcasing infrastructure? Because again, when we look at the numbers of people dying in Angola, of the diseases, the preventable diseases that are not cured, and we don't have a primary system of education, of health, like health posts which are functional so that people don't need to go with malaria to the main hospitals. Those infrastructures are not there. So that's what people complain. And again, when you look at the budget of Angola, at the turn of when we achieved peace, Angola had a budget of $11 billion a year, 10, 11.
That's in
And we jumped
1975.
2002.
Okay.
And within a year or two, that jumped to $40 billion. Now, when you ask, where has that money gone to? We don't see the results. You know, Angola fought a civil war for 27 years.
That's correct.
And we had one of the most seasoned armies in the continent because of our long stretch of war. Now, can you believe that the Angolan armed forces doesn't have boots? Angolan soldiers don't have boots and uniforms? And you will say that there has been a progress?
Are you suggesting that with all the wealth that Angola has compared to the other countries in the region, it cannot buy boots for its troops? It cannot buy modern weapons for its troops to protect the country?
I wrote an article and I sent you a copy just yesterday.
Yes.
Explaining how to depots, weapons depots, ammunition depots burned because of the lack of infrastructures. Those were the main ammunition reserves of the country.
Interesting.
Is that serious for a country of Angola's reputation?
Let me follow up. many young Angolans were born after the war. We are looking at maybe people who are below 30, and you have
Yes.
like what, 70% of the population is below like 30, right?
Yes. Yes.
What does independence, if it means anything, what does it mean to them? Despite all this natural wealth that you have, the oil, you are the second largest producer of oil in Africa. Angola continues to struggle with basic inequality, poverty. You talked about education. You talked about healthcare. What has this translated into 50 years of independence? What does this mean for an average young person on the streets?
It has meant lack of education, lack of opportunities, lack of health. Most young people nowadays in Angola no longer believe in the country. And many want to find a way to their way abroad. A country as rich as Angola, and it's not just oil, we have diamonds, we have all sorts of minerals here. We have water resources, we have everything a country needs to develop, except brains and goodwill. What Angola is facing nowadays is a classic case of new colonialism, in which the colonial infrastructures were not dismantled. The colonial mindset was not dismantled, but captured by those who came into power and continue to rule the same way, with the same mindset of extractive mentality to take from Angola to place it in Portugal. Some who think of themselves being smart no longer put all the eggs in Portugal. They diversifying the laundromats. Now it's Dubai. It's the Emirates. Some are going as far as Latvia and some of those countries to buy properties there for money laundering. The point is, if you look around Africa and you draw a list of multimillionaires, you will find that Angola might be topping that list.
That's correct.
Because it's not wealth acquired through private enterprising, it's acquired through looting. And as an Angolan,
I thought that was the disease of the previous regime. This regime was trying to do better to make sure that people are equitably, I guess, part of this country that we call Angola.
President Lourenço was always part of the old regime. He was Minister of Defense under Dos Santos and Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. His wife was the Minister of Planning for 12 years under Dos Santos. It's the same regime. The difference is that Lourenço came up with a speech to distance himself from José Eduardo dos Santos and replace some of dos Santos' top cronies with his own crew of looters.
So how would you describe how the ruling party, the MPLA, has managed to maintain political power for over 5 decades, and yet you are dealing with these issues? How are young people able to keep this regime in place when nothing has changed and they just keep on enriching themselves?
It is not that difficult. For many years, it was through the civil war. After 2002, there was a sort of gold rush. Everyone wanted to come to Angola, Americans, Chinese, and everyone. And the Chinese came first to aid with the national reconstruction. And the West was trying to pander to get equal opportunities as well. And the relationship with China went sour. And we haven't seen the great benefits of that. And now it's the time for the West to return in full force. You hear time and again the Lobito corridor.
Yes. I actually was
That's
going to
the
ask you
entry
something about
point
that. Yeah.
of the West. You know, you will never hear that the Chinese were ready. That very same railway they talk so much about was fixed by the Chinese in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
You see,
Just to
and
follow up on.
so
Okay, go ahead.
the youth is that very same youth that has not received proper education. It has not learned how to organize because civil society was never really structured in this country in a way that it can be a force to reckon with because it was always dependent on foreign aid. And the difference is when you look at other countries in Africa where much international support has been poured in to civil society, uh, the international support for civil society in Angola was always negligent, you know, piecemeal. And all the wealth of the regime was used to either bribe people or to strengthen the repressive apparatus, you know, of looting. So it's a country that has been left in such a state that you don't even have a functional opposition. You don't have a structured civil society. And that's why we continue to lend our voice and write and speak out so that the government understands that even though it does not have a structured opposition and civil society, there are voices here that will say stop.
You brought up the issue of the Lobito corridor. Let's go back to that issue. The United States has praised Angola's regional role through that Lobito corridor, right? So, what does this partnership signify, especially for Angola's geopolitical influence in Southern Africa?
The majority of Angolans don't really understand what they're talking about. That railway was fixed by the Chinese and has always been transporting since the Chinese fixed it, transporting minerals from DRC to the Lobito port for export. This has been going on. One thing is to say, look, we, the West, want to invest to improve this infrastructure. The other is to use it as a political discourse, you know, as a political narrative of Angola doing something regionally. No, the railway was always there. It was destroyed during the war, and the Chinese fixed it. And now, what the West can say, and the US can say, is that they want to revamp what the Chinese have already rebuilt. But again, our history in Africa is of erasing the past, as if the Chinese have never been there. No, the Chinese were there. They're the ones who fixed the railway. The company which is managing it now, you know, is managing something rebuilt by the Chinese. And that must be said because most Angolans don't understand what is this mambo jumbo of the Lobito corridor.
Yeah. How about for people who say, for example, that the civil war left deep scars in the population? How has the Angolan government, the ruling party, addressed as issues such as reconciliation and rebuilding the country since the war ended?
It hasn't really done much. Basically, the war ended with UNITA's defeat. And the Angolan armed forces became the main pillar of reconciliation by integrating the remnants of the UNITA's army, generals and personnel, into a unified army. And that has been the main pillar of stability and reconciliation in the country because we've never had any other formal process. The main process has been the army. And it is the same army. That's why I keep mentioning the army, because it is the same army now that has served as the bedrock of reconciliation in the country, that is left now with no barracks, no boots, no food, nothing. And 10% of our budget goes to military defense and security expenditures. And at the end of each year, that budget is overblown because of expenditures made out of the budget. While the budget allocated for education sometimes is not even 5% of that budget is not allocated a year. So where does the money that is earmarked for the army goes to? Someone is pocketing it. And the president, who prides himself as being a general as well, has done a great disservice to the country by letting the army collapse due to negligence.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Now, in case you are just joining us, we are live. We are streaming live on all social media platforms. This week marks 50 years since Angola's independence from Portugal as colonial rule. They got their independence on November 11th, 1975. While this milestone symbolizes sovereignty and hope, it followed a devastating 27-year civil war between MPLA and UNITA. Today, Angola is richer in resources like oil and diamonds, with Rwanda showcasing luxurious skyscrapers. However, behind this modern image, many Angolans live in poverty, with over half of the population surviving on less than $3 a day and facing high youth unemployment. And my guest today is Rafael Marques, a veteran Angolan journalist, a political activist, and the executive director of UFORO, Good Governance Center. Before the break, Marques, you are talking about how the Angolan government has even failed to provide for the army, an army that is there to protect this country from intruders, from invaders. The country has failed to at least even give them basic necessities. Yet Angola is considered one of the richest countries on the continent.
Absolutely. And if you look, you mentioned the borders. There is no country that has been so overrun by illegal immigration as Angola in the past 10 years. Basically, we have open borders. The country has been overrun. You go anywhere in the country, you will find people from all over Africa. We have no border control.
But then one could argue that that's a problem for every other country. Look at the United States here. We are struggling with the border control, yet we have the technology, we have the resources to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think in situations where you have a lot of young people who are unemployed. There are going to be external pressures that push and internal pressures that pull. For example, all the countries in that region, neighboring countries, are not doing very well. So people are coming to Angola to look for greener pastures. That's why you maybe have, an influx of young people evading or coming into Angola.
Absolutely, I agree with you. But again, when you look, we have basically much of Angola's we have the border with the Atlantic Ocean. Even people sailing across and making it to Angola in boats, no problem. The main point is this is a country, a militarized country, a militarized regime. And we have a militarized regime that let its own army collapse. The very protectors collapse. It does not bode well for the stability of the country. And we've seen in many parts of Africa what happens when the army is in disarray. The infighting, the factions, and the troubles that come with it. And we have, and you've talked about the memory of the war. The younger generations no longer have such memories. But for many of us who went through all these wars before and after independence, it's a huge risk for the country's stability to hold it together because we don't have formal processes of reconciliation, of nation building, of state reforms to create a sense of belonging for Angolans in their own country. That's what creates a situation of great danger, even for those who come looking for better ways of living. That as long as everything is quiet, are very welcomed because Angolans are very peaceful until there is trouble. So it's really important to bring out these issues so that those in power and those surrounding Angola are aware of the predicament we find ourselves in at the moment. Because it can have ripple effects in neighboring countries. That's my point.
Okay, so earlier you talked about how the Angolan armed forces are underfunded and are demoralized despite the government's opulence. How does this reflect on the big picture, the broader governance challenge? If you have a weak army, chances are that they could take you out. But at least we haven't seen that in Angola. We've seen a series of coups happen in West Africa. We haven't seen that in Angola. Going back to the points that you made, saying that the army is underfunded,
Because
demoralized.
everyone thinks that Angola is that strong. So it's not in people's mind because there is that thought, these guys fought for so long, they have an organized army. And that is not the reality anymore. And that's why, as a journalist, as an investigative journalist, I've brought this issue up, because of the dangers it poses to the security of the country and even the region. So that we can discuss that. When we talk about the skylines, great. You build skylines, and in 50 years, you're not able to build, a handful of barracks. to house properly. We have, and the barracks, the existing barracks are colonial ones,
Interesting.
where the general chief of the general staff works is colonial. Where the head of the army works, the head of the air forces, navy, it's all colonial infrastructures. Some have been upgraded, some remain in disrepair, but in most of them, you don't even have running water. Running water, you know. You don't have basic sanitation conditions. So what is the worth of showcasing skyscrapers, high rises, when you don't provide the basics? The same goes to schools, and we've already discussed in this program. You know, most of schools in Angola, primary schools and secondary schools don't have running water. You know.
But how does the government in power justify 50 years of independence and they don't have like a structured system for primary education, secondary education, even university education? There is no funding for education. From what you said earlier, you said that over 3 million children are roaming on the streets of Luanda and other major cities. How can a country or a regime that has been in power for so long justify that?
As any other crooked African regime justifies. You blame it on the colonialists, you blame it on the opposition, you blame it on someone else, and you make promises that you're not going to be able to comply with. In the State of the Nation address just last month, the president said, I have $500 million to make primary education priority in the country. Where does he take the $500 million from? From his pocket? That is not reflected in the state budget. You know, what the president has to announce is a budget because he's the head of government. It's the state budget saying, okay, here it is earmarked, this much money we've put down for education. Not in a speech, he says, I have 500 million for education. Is he taking from his father's account or his heirloom's account? No.
Are you suggesting that the Angolan government just runs like that without even a budget?
Of course. Our budget is a fiction. In the past 8 years, the president has spent over $1 billion traveling on his trips abroad. And he's not been able to deliver
But
barracks
people
for the
just
soldiers to
re-elected
protect
him. People just gave him another mandate. Isn't that confidence in his abilities to do the job that he was elected to do?
Will you say Samia Suhulu got a mandate from the Tanzanian people?
Well, you know, democracy is all relative. You could argue that Samia Suluhu Hassan won with 98% of the vote. It's a mandate of the people. That's what the ruling party has said.
Exactly. And my president also made a very memorable speech in which he said, hunger is a relative concept. So, meaning that people complaining that there's hunger and famine in the country are speaking from a different concept than his.
So
And
you
he
mean
has the legit
he's
and he has the
oblivious to the
legitimate concept.
so he's oblivious to the fact that there are so many people in Angola who are going hungry and they can't afford to eat. In a way, he's become the Maria Antoinette of our times.
Absolutely. And for him, it's just people don't want to work. And never mind, there are no jobs to apply to because the economy is down, the private sector is not growing, more companies closing every day. And If you ask him about the economy, he will say he's earmarked this much money for agriculture or for the diversification of the economy. It's buzzwords that Angolan leaders have been using for the past 20, 30 years, and they use the same words. We will diversify the economy. We've given this much money to an investment bank to support local businesses. And they're the businessmen who will basically have access to that credit. So it's all twisted.
So,
And the same way Paul Biya at 92, 93, you know, can claim, he can't even claim because we don't know how sound of mind he is. But those around him to say people gave him another mandate.
but to your point, what for example, artists? You have a lot of artists in Angola. You have historians. You have educators like yourself. You have women. You have one of the richest women on the continent is the former first daughter. She's arguably one of the richest people on the continent. You have people. What role do those kinds of people play in today's Angola? How can they bring about changes that we are talking about? How can they build a future where Angola is taking its young people to the next level?
You've mentioned Isabel dos Santos, the former first daughter. Her assets were seized in Angola by President Lourenço's crew. And now, if you ask if those assets were put at the service of the nation, no. They're at the service of the ruling elite. And I will give you one prime example. The cement company, which the government nationalized and seized, and Isabel dos Santos was a majority shareholder there. It's the company that has a list of around 70 expats between Portuguese, Colombians, Mexicans, Dominicans, you name them, Hispanics. They make $13 million a year, those expats, which is far superior, than the 1,000 Angolans working for that company. It's the same company that the state pays the head of gardening in a cement factory $8,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
The head of the canteen, who's Portuguese as well, makes $8,000 a month as well.
Wow.
And an Angolan head of department at the same company makes less than $2,000 a month.
What?
Yes, absolutely. So that's why when I mention new colonialism and I say what this ruling elite has done basically was to capture the colonial structure and use it to its own advantage and to keep people down. And that's why when you have foreigners coming as consultants to Angola, they will make far more money than any Angolan, even if Angolans are more qualified.
Interesting. Now, I hear you say that the Angolan government or the Angolan system is still a very much elite-driven system, as opposed to having genuine political or economic reforms under President Lourenço.
It is a racist-driven system.
Hello?
You will hardly find it in Africa. It's a racist-driven system.
So, racist, what do you mean? Can you maybe explain that for our audience to understand? So is it because you have an influx of these white Portuguese people who have lived in that country, quote unquote, call Angola their home, as opposed to Angolans, indigenous Angolans who are there maybe at the service of some of these people who have come to Angola.
That's the only way you can keep the indigenous Angolans without accessing their resources, without having the benefits of independence, of freedom. You know, this is a government that will even facilitate an Eritrean businessman to flourish in the country, but not an Angolan unless that Angolan is a member of the ruling elite or is someone of interest to the ruling elite. Otherwise, no way that person will be able to prosper in the country. And it's very racist in that sense, because in this company, I'll give you another example. There were many Zimbabweans working there as well, Zimbabweans, South Africans, and others, other Africans, which make 3 times less than their European or Latino counterparts.
Mm.
And they were all fired. They were all removed.
Because they raised an issue, a legitimate issue of equal justice, equal pay.
Absolutely, because some said, but this is your country. One thing is for us, Africans to come here and earn 2 or 3 times less than these individuals. The other is you Angolans getting paid far less, a head of department making less, 4 times less than the Portuguese who tenders the gardens at the cement factory.
Wow.
We have a very serious issue. And that's why also when people start speaking out in Angola, you have international support to ensure, those voices do not cause much trouble, and are sort of either contained or discredited. Because you have a system here that continues to benefit Europe, continues to benefit, international interests, to the detriment of Angolans in ways that are unspeakable in other African countries.
Mm.
Unacceptable.
I wanted to go back to the point of young people, especially now that we see a lot of Gen Zs all over the world getting agitated, rising up, and challenging the status quo. With nearly 70% of the population in Angola under 30, how critical is youth unemployment? Are we more likely to see a Gen Z rise up and want to challenge the status quo in Angola?
You've made a very critical point, Gen Z. The Angolan education system has long stripped critical thinking from its pedagogic materials. There's no critical thinking. The teacher goes to the chalkboard and writes, and the students must copy, and that's the end of it. I have a Gen Z friend who's studying law now, hasn't had 5 classes because the lecturers are always absent, and they're already writing tests with 5 lessons. And so teaching to the minimum possible level. And so that's why you don't have a critical mass among the Gen Z. You have a very much aware generation because of the social media and others, but without the ability to harness the power of the youth to generate a movement because there's no critical thinking. And without critical thinking, you can't really see the logic of organization. And that's what's lacking here. When you talk about Tanzania, you talk about Kenya, Uganda, other countries, you have critical thinking embedded into the education system. Here, it's one of the things that this regime has effectively done, is to strip critical thinking from education, from the education system. Even when you watch the public television, the debates, those who are invited to debate on public television oftentimes are individuals with a clear mission to showcase mediocrity, not critical thinking. And so that people will have as their reference mediocrity as the reference point.
Wow. So we are almost out of time, but as you mark 50 years of independence, what lessons can maybe other post-independent African countries draw from the successes and the shortcomings of Angola?
I would say learn from your own experiences, as we Angolans have to grapple with our own experiences, learn from our own experiences, and see that the fracture line, the fault lines here that will bring about change is within the regime itself, because at this point, because of the many internal grievances and the state in which President Lorenzo has left the army, sorry, it's going to cause internal problems. And that's when we will be able to see those within the system who will then say, well, it's time to give the country back to Angola, to Angolans.
Wow. Well, I guess we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. Bye-bye.
Rafael Marques is a veteran Angolan journalist, political activist, and executive director of the Uforo Good Governance Center. Thank you so much for your insight and for joining us tonight. This is different perspectives. We want to know what you think about Angola as it celebrates 50 years of independence, a milestone that stirs both pride and reflection. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And of course, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Paul Ndiho on Substack, X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Spotify. And stay tuned for continuing coverage on this platform and across all our social media platforms. Thank you so much, and good night. Stick around for a minute, okay?
Okay, great.
Yeah, let me end.
Good.